Okay, it is April of 1900 in Wissahickon, Pennsylvania, and a young Harvard-educated chemist has just woken up in the middle of the night. He raises his head and finds his fat tabby cat sitting on his chest with her moist, cool nose pressed up against his lips. The chemist recoils backwards and the cat freezes. The only part of her body that moves are her eyes, which slowly drift upward, matching the gaze of her terrified owner. "Scat, you beast," yells the man, and the tabby cat leaps off the bed and slinks away into the black of the night. The next morning, the chemist is confused. That must have been a dream, he thinks. No way my cat would do something like that. And so, just as an experiment, the next night, he leaves the door to his room wide open, basically inviting the cat to come and pay him a visit. And this time, things go a little differently. That night, the chemist has a horrible dream, a nightmare that he's trapped in a locked room with no windows or doors, and someone, somewhere, is maliciously sucking the oxygen out of the room. Struggling to breathe, the man opens his eyes, and there is his cat sitting on his chest with her mouth glued to his mouth in a loathsome kiss. The man's life, his very life, if you can understand, seemed to be flowing fast from his lips. Weakness began to set in, and with it, a strange sense of calm indifference, of acceptance, submission even. The man's cat was killing him, yes, but that warm, soft body pressed against his chest and neck just felt so comforting and cozy. Maybe it wouldn't be too bad to just slip away. But no, the man doesn't give up. He finds his courage, and with arms as heavy as lead, he breaks away from the intoxication of surrender. He swats away that ghastly beast and rises, gasping for breath, with a scratch on his arm as the only evidence of a terrible night. You know, when I decided to try and make a video about the old superstition of cats sucking the breath out of sleeping humans, I was expecting to find a bunch of lighthearted, silly little folk tales, and that's about it. Instead though, what I really found was quite literally dozens of accounts of people swearing up and down that a cat genuinely tried to suck away the breath of them or a loved one. Barely even 100 years ago, it was not uncommon at all for someone to believe that you couldn't leave a cat alone in the same room with a sleeping kid because the cat would jump on the child's bed, place their mouth over the kid's mouth, and suck all the oxygen out of their lungs. I'm sure many of you have already heard of this superstition, maybe even from your own older friends and relatives. But what you might not know is just how incredibly pervasive this myth really used to be. Check this out. Here's another story, this time from Wilmington, Delaware, back in 1917. A man named Lacey was lying in his bed in the middle of the night when all of a sudden he woke up to the sight of a great Maltese cat drawing the breath right out of his lungs. Just like with the first story, the man felt weak and exhausted, barely able to muster up enough energy to get a hold of the cat and hurl it out the window. This time, the paper even published the man's name and address, so the guy clearly had no problem attaching himself to this fantastic sounding story. He really, truly believed that that cat was sucking his breath. Just like Mrs. Agnes Space thought that a cat was trying to inhale her breath in Deckertown, New York back in 1877. Agnes woke up to a terrible weight pinning her to the bed. The family cat was sitting on her chest, mouth on her mouth, leeching away her life and preventing her from moving or making a sound. It wasn't until her husband woke up and pulled away the treacherous feline that Mrs. Space could finally breathe again. Or how about this one? Evansville, Indiana, back in 1894. Mrs. C.E. Bethel walked into her 2-year-old daughter's room around 1:30 in the morning and found a cat nuzzled up against the toddler's mouth. Mrs. Bethel screamed and tossed the cat away and summoned for a doctor as quick as she could, But before the doctor even made it to the house, thankfully, the little girl woke up seemingly unharmed. This Indiana story in particular is really interesting because of the final paragraph that the Evansville Journal used to close out the story. Check this out. After the scare with the cat, the 2-year-old girl fell asleep again and awoke bright and early, and during the day was as happy as ever, not knowing in her innocence that but for the timely appearance of her mother, she would not be alive. Is it just me, or is that the newspaper blatantly saying that the cat actually would have sucked out the kid's breath if given the chance? Like, the whole tone of this article is not a journalist reporting on a crazy superstitious belief of some backward thinking old lady. Like, what this is a genuine article that you're supposed to take at face value about a cat that actually was trying to suck the breath out of a toddler. And what's really crazy is that this is not even close to the only article that I found where the journalist kind of seemed to fully buy into the myth. Like, here's another story from Wisconsin in 1913 where a mother left her baby on the front porch, saw a stray cat crouching over the cradle, and then rushed outside to find the baby temporarily unconscious. And the newspaper, just matter of fact, says that the cat must have inhaled the kid's breath. Kenny, Illinois, 1899. A father interrupted a cat who was sucking his 6-year-old son's breath, and according to the newspaper, had Mr. Wallace not awakened just as he did, the child would soon have been dead. Glenwood, Iowa, 1913. Mrs. Cross saved her toddler from a breath-sucking cat, and if she had been just 10 minutes too late, that cat would have sucked out every ounce of oxygen that toddler had, no doubt. Like, clearly, this was not just some obscure superstition that most people laughed at. A lot of people actually thought that cats could suck out your breath. So if you're like me, you might be wondering at this point, why would a cat want to suck somebody's breath? Like, if you actually believe this myth to be true, then I feel like there needs to be at least some kind of explanation for what the cat's motive is supposed to be, right? Well, unfortunately, most people didn't seem to bother too much with that question. Like, it's pretty rare that a cat breath-sucking story actually makes a guess at why cats want our breath in the first place. But that said, when they did make a guess, it was a doozy. The only real, consistently repeated explanation that I found for why cats want to suck people's breath is because the cat gets high from our breath. Yeah, apparently our breath has the same effect on a cat that liquor has on a person. At least according to this Scottish doctor from back in 1907. So there you go. Your cat is trying to kill you so they can get high. Mystery solved. Now, of course, it's important to mention that not everybody back then believed in this superstition. There were plenty of detractors. Just check out this book called Popular Errors Explained from 1841. It is impossible for a cat to suck an infant's breath, mostly because a cat's mouth isn't big enough to block both a human's mouth and nose at the same time. And also, as this newspaper from 1849 points out, there's absolutely nothing about the construction of a cat's mouth that would allow it to suck out your breath anyway, even if the cat could cover your entire face. So just from an anatomical perspective, this superstition is dead on arrival. It's just not physically possible for a cat to suck out your breath for a wide variety of reasons. And, that should be the only argument that you need, right? That's really all you got to say to discredit the myth. Well, for some people, that just wasn't enough. Sometimes I came across some more creative explanations for why cats can't actually suck out someone's breath. And in fact, some of the reasons that I found for the superstition being fake are almost just as ridiculous as the superstition itself. Like, check out this newspaper article from 1859, for example. The article emphatically rejects the notion that a cat could suck out a baby's breath because babies have stronger powers of suction than cats, so if a cat ever tried to suck a baby's breath, the baby would win, and it would actually be the cat that has its breath stolen. So there you go. Cats are totally capable of sucking out a baby's breath. It's just the baby is too strong, and so poor kitty just doesn't stand a chance. Or how about this? This guy in 1862 says that cats don't suck the breath out of people. Instead, what they actually do is breathe carbonic acid gas directly into your mouth and down into your lungs. And that is how cats kill people. They're not sucking your breath, they're poisoning you. In the same vein, this guy in 1902 says that a cat's breath is actually a natural anesthetic. And that is why it's dangerous if a cat breathes into your mouth. Again, they're not sucking your breath, they're just poisoning you with their breath. I especially like this one because the guy's evidence for cats having knockout gas breath is that if a cat grabs a mouse, then the mouse doesn't struggle. It just kind of goes limp. And so, therefore, clearly, cat breath is like chloroform. Like I said, though, despite those bizarre edge cases, most people who didn't believe in the superstition just correctly recognize that it's physically impossible for a cat to suck out someone's breath. And in fact, a lot of skeptics even had an explanation for why so many people were waking up with cats on their chests and cats on their faces. And that explanation is that cats like to be warm, and sometimes they just want to snuggle in with sleeping people, including sleeping children. And hey, if you ate something right before you went to bed, then the cat might even be attracted to the scent of food on your breath. Really, at the end of the day, these are just a bunch of curious cats that are trying to get cozy with a warm human being. Imagine poor kitty snuggled up to a sleeping toddler, cozy as could be, lost in dreamland, all of a sudden ripped away and tossed out the window under suspicion of attempted murder. How unfair. Anyway, though, let's move on. Next up, I'm going to tell you some stories where people actually died or were seriously injured because a cat sucked out their breath. Let's start in Voluntown, Connecticut, back in 1894. A young woman named Miss Wilson was found by her aunt at 4 a.m, gasping for breath, with a cat laying across her chest. The cat was removed, of course, but unfortunately, the damage was already done, and the young woman died just a few minutes later. When she had gone to bed earlier that evening, she was in perfect health, so the local doctors, of course, concluded that she must have died via strangulation because a cat sucked her breath. Next, here's a paragraph that I found in a newspaper from 1872 that just super matter-of-factly reports that a child was recently killed explicitly because a cat sucked their breath. And in Atlantic City in 1921, a cat was found sucking the breath of an infant, and it took over half an hour for a doctor to revive the child. In Bluefield, West Virginia in 1913, a police officer was walking down the street when he heard screaming from a window high above his head. So the cop ran inside the building, burst into the room, and found a man nearly unconscious with a cat actively sucking his breath. The cop threw the cat off and successfully restored the man to consciousness. Or how about this one? Gladstone, Michigan, 1907. This one is real harrowing. A farmer went into his children's room and found all 5 of his kids passed out cold with the family cat actively sucking the breath of the 5th child. Apparently, that greedy cat had gone through the whole room overnight and systematically sucked out the breath of not just 1, but 5 human beings, 2 of which the local doctor didn't even expect to recover. It's pretty wild, right? In all of these stories, the newspaper is reporting death or injury objectively as the result of a cat sucking the breath from a human being. And those aren't even close to the only examples that I found of newspapers doing this. Like, feel free to pause the video and read this next batch of articles for yourself if you want, but I also found stories of humans supposedly being killed by cats sucking their breath in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 1888, and Baltimore, Maryland, 1936, and Chicago, Illinois, 1890, and New Holland, Georgia, 1907, and Indianapolis, Indiana in 1894, and that is just a small sample of the dozens that I found, and there's probably dozens more that I didn't even find. Like, what the hell is going on here? Like, obviously, none of these people actually died because a cat sucked their breath. But still, how are so many different newspapers all across the country reporting stories like this? Well, at first, you might be inclined to think that this is just a bunch of journalists trying to sell papers, right? Like, clearly, these are just sad stories of someone passing away, usually a child, and a newspaper is cynically trying to turn the story into something more than it is. Like, yeah, these papers are basically reporting as fact that a human being was killed by a cat inhaling their breath, but the journalists were just trying to chase a headline, weren't they? Like, they didn't actually believe that a cat could kill someone like that, right? Well, take a look at this. In 1907, in Clarksville, Pennsylvania, a young child sadly passed away after the family cat was discovered sitting on the kid's chest, and the deputy coroner literally put in the coroner's report that the cause of death was suffocation due to a cat sucking the breath from the deceased's mouth. And that is what was entered into the official county records. Like this is not just a newspaper sensationalizing a story, and it's not just some random superstitious family that everybody's laughing at. Like, this is a government employee believing in the myth so much that they literally entered documentation of it into official record. And what's really crazy is that this happened all the time. Like, I found a ton of examples of someone in some position of authority essentially co-signing the validity of the superstition. Like, here we have yet another doctor in Denver, Colorado, officially stating that a human being was killed by a cat inhaling their breath. And here is a coroner's jury in 1882 in Pittsburgh rendering a verdict that a cat killed a girl by sucking her breath. And here's another coroner's jury determining the same thing in New York City back in 1863. And here's another one in Chicago in 1890. And in 1909, a doctor determined that a couple of twins in Barre, Massachusetts were really sick because the family cat had sucked away their breath. And finally, this is my favorite one. Here is a justice of the peace in Oklahoma City in 1919 offering his professional opinion that a cat just killed a human by sucking their breath, as they have been known to do in other cases. So what on earth is the explanation for all of this? Like, these are all stories where somebody actually died. Like, there's a lot of detail in some of these accounts. There's no way they're all just fully fabricated stories from the ground up. So where are they all coming from? Like, how are so many people's deaths getting blamed on cats sucking their breath? Well, even as far back as 1921, people were coming up with theories. Here's one. The idea that cats can suck people's breath is absurd, but cats have sometimes been known to smother children by sleeping on their faces, which does seem like a plausible explanation. Although, as this newspaper points out, there's a good chance that a child would probably scare the cat away by thrashing and spluttering if it couldn't breathe. Plus, I feel like if this was the primary explanation for all of these instances, then wouldn't we still occasionally hear about this happening today? Like, I tried my hardest to find any modern accounts of cats accidentally smothering children, and I really only came up with one 25-year-old story from the UK that is extremely circumstantial and not at all a definitive case. So if you ask me, it's not really a feasible explanation that all of these cases from the 1800s and early 1900s were just cats laying on people's faces and stopping their breathing. Like maybe some because, at least this is something that's physically possible that could happen, but definitely the majority cannot be explained this way. Instead, my explanation is much more simple. The cats didn't really have anything to do with the deaths besides being in the same room with the deceased. Like, let's pull up that story from Voluntown, Connecticut that I told you about earlier. In this story, a young woman was found gasping for breath with a cat laying across her chest. And after the cat was removed, the woman died, and the local doctors determined that the cat must have sucked her breath. But if you take a step back and really look at this story, the only reason that the doctors thought that the cat was the one who killed the woman was because the cat was discovered sitting on top of the woman. Like, maybe the woman just started spluttering and struggling to breathe in her sleep for some reason unrelated to the cat, and then the cat just came over to investigate. Like, check out this story from Winnemucca, Nevada in 1907 that I think really illustrates my point. The headline here is, "Cat Sucked His Breath." But then if you read the story, you'll find out that a cat was discovered in bed with a 6-year-old who was unconscious, and after the kid was revived, it was determined that the cat must have sucked his breath, because the cat was in the same bed with the kid, so why else would the kid have passed out? Most of the stories of cats supposedly killing people are like this. Like the cat is found near or on top of someone who is dead or dying, and ultimately Kitty catches the blame for the death. My guess is that person was probably already dead or dying from something unrelated to the cat, and the cat just went over to check things out. Occasionally, in some of these reports, you'll find somebody saying that they legitimately saw the cat, like with its mouth, actually covering the victim's mouth and actually sucking out the victim's breath. But is that really all that surprising, given how completely pervasive this superstition used to be? Like, just imagine that you're living back in 1890, for example, and you grow up hearing from your older relatives that cats can inhale your breath, and you read in the local newspaper that somebody actually died in your town because a cat sucked their breath, and your doctor tells you that it's a real thing, and the local coroner just closed out a case reporting that someone died from a cat sucking their breath. And then one day you go into your toddler's room and you find the family cat with its face pressed up against your kid's face. Is it really any wonder that you're going to see that and immediately conclude that the cat must be trying to suck the breath out of your child's lungs? Or for an even better example, this time imagine that you're farmer Ed Macbeth in Guildford, Ontario, Canada, back in 1902, and 7 of your cows have died in the last few months, and then one day you walk into your barn and you find the farm cat with its face pressed up against the face of a young calf. Is it really any wonder that you're gonna see that and you're gonna conclude that Kitty must have been sucking the breath out of all your livestock? I don't think so. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.